my old church at York, and some of the natives laid hands on them, and I'm afraid I lost my temper. It is said," Puck's voice was wickedly meek, "that there was a great fight." But I must have been a silly lad." Wilfrid spoke with a sudden thick burr in his voice. He coughed and took up his silvery tones again. "There was no fight, really. My men thumped a few of them, but the tide rose half an hour before its time, with a strong wind, and we backed off. What I wanted to say, though, was that the seas about us were full of sleek seals watching the scuffle. My good Eddy, my chaplain, insisted that they were demons. Yes, yes, that was my first acquaintance with the South Saxons and their seals." "But not the only time you were wrecked, was it?" said Dan. "Alas, no! On sea and land my life seems to have been one long shipwreck." He looked at the Johann Kalim slab, as old Hobden sometimes looked into the fire. "Ah, well." "But did you ever have any more patients among the seals?" said Una after a little. "Oh, the seals! I beg your pardon. They are the important things. Yes, yes. I went back to the South Saxons after 15 years. No, I did not come by water, but overland from my own Northumbria to see what I could do. It's little one can do with that class of native, except make them stop killing each other and themselves." "Why did they kill themselves?" Una asked, her chin in her hand. "Because they were heathen. When they grew tired of life, as if they were the only people, they would jump into the sea. They called it going to Wotan. It wasn't want of food always, by any means. A man would tell you that he felt grey in the heart, or a woman would say that she saw nothing but long days in front of her, and they'd saunter away to the mud flats, and that would be the end of them, poor souls, unless one headed them off. One had to run quick, but one can't allow people to lay hands on themselves because they happen to feel grey. Yes, yes, extraordinary people, the South Saxons. Disheartening sometimes." "What does that say now?" The organist changed tune again. "Only a hymn for next Sunday," said Una. "The church's one foundation. Go on, please, about running over the mud." "I should like to have seen you." "I dare say you would. I really could run in those days. Ethelwalch, the king, gave me some 5 or 6 muddy parishes by the sea, and the first time my good Eddy and I rode there we saw a man slouching along the slob, among the seals at Manhood End. My good Eddy disliked seals, but he swallowed his objections, and ran like a hare." "Why?" said Dan. "For the same reason that I did. We thought he was one of our people going to drown himself. As a matter of fact, Eddy and I were nearly drowned in the pools before we overtook him. To cut a long story short, we found ourselves very muddy, very breathless, being quietly made fun of in good Latin by a very well spoken person. No, he'd no idea of going to Wotan. He was fishing on his own beaches, and he showed us the beacons and turf heaps that divided his land from the church property. He took us to his own house, gave us a good dinner, some more than good wine, sent a guide with us into Crickster, and became one of my best and most refreshing friends. He was a man by descent, from the west edge of the kingdom, a scholar educated, curiously enough, at Lyons, my old school, had travelled the world over, even to Rome, and was a brilliant talker. We found we had scores of acquaintances in common. It seemed he was a small chief under King Ethelwalch, and I fancy the king was somewhat afraid of him. The South Saxons mistrusted a man who talks too well. Ah, now I've left out the very point of my story. He kept a great grey-muzzled old dog seal that he had brought up from a pup. He called it Pada, after one of my clergy. It was rather like fat, honest old Pada. The creature followed him everywhere, and nearly knocked down my good Eddy when we first met him. Eddy loathed it. He used to sniff at his thin legs and cough at him. I can't say I ever took much notice of it. I was not fond of animals, till one day Eddy came to me with a circumstantial account of some witchcraft that Meon worked. He would tell the seal to go down to the beach the last thing at night, and bring him word of the weather. When it came back, Meon might say to his slaves, "Pata thinks we shall have wind tomorrow. Haul up the boats." I spoke to Meon casually about the story, and he laughed. He told me he could judge by the look of the creature's coat and the way it sniffed that weather was brewing. Quite possible. One need not put down everything one does not understand to the work of bad spirits, or good ones for that matter. He nodded towards Puck, who nodded gaily in return. "I say so," he went on, "because to a certain extent I have been made a victim of that habit of mind. Some while after I was settled at Selsey, King Ethelwalch and Queen Ebba ordered their people to be baptized. I fear I'm too old to believe that a whole nation can change its heart at the King's command, and I had a shrewd suspicion that their real motive was to get a good harvest. No rain had fallen for 2 or 3 years, but as soon as we had finished baptizing, it fell heavily, and they all said it was a miracle." "And was it?" Dan asked. "Everything in life is a miracle." But the Archbishop twisted the heavy ring on his finger. "I should be slow, very slow, should I be, to assume that a certain sort of miracle happens whenever lazy and improvident people say they are going to turn over a new leaf if they are paid for it. My friend Meon had sent his slaves to the font, but he had not come himself, so the next time I rode over to return a manuscript, I took the liberty of asking why. He was perfectly open about it. He looked on the King's action as a heathen attempt to curry favour with the Christians' God through me the Archbishop, and he would have none of it. 'My dear man,' I said, 'admitting that is the case, surely you, as an educated person, don't believe in Wotan and all the other hobgoblins any more than Pata here.' The old seal was hunched up on his ox hide behind his master's chair. 'Even if I don't,' he said, 'why should I insult the memory of my father's gods? I have sent you 103 of my rascals to christen. Isn't that enough?' 'By no means,' I answered. 'I want you.' 'He wants us. What do you think of that, Pata?' He pulled the seal's whiskers until it threw back its head and roared, and he pretended to interpret. 'No. Pata says he won't be baptized yet awhile. He says you'll stay to dinner and come fishing with me tomorrow, because you're overworked and need a rest.' 'I wish you'd keep yon brute in his proper place,' I said, and Eddi, my chaplain, agreed. 'I do,' said Meon. 'I keep him just next to my heart. He can't tell a lie, and he doesn't know how to love anyone except me. It'd be the same if I were dying on a mud bank, wouldn't it, Pata?' 'Ugh, ugh,' said Pata, and he put up his head to be scratched. Then Meon began to tease Eddi. 'Pata says if Eddi saw his Archbishop dying on a mud bank, Eddi would tuck up his gown and run. Pata knows Eddi can run too. Pata came into Wittering Church last Sunday, all wet, to hear the music, and Eddi ran out.' My good Eddi rubbed his hands and his shins together, and flushed. 'Pata is a child of the devil, who is the father of lies,' he cried, and begged my pardon for having spoken. I forgave him. 'Yes, you were just about stupid enough for a musician,' said Meon. 'But here he is. Sing a hymn to him, and see if he can't stand it. You'll find my small harp beside the fireplace.' Eddi, who was really an excellent musician, played and sang for quite half an hour. Pata shuffled off his ox hide, hunched himself on his flippers before him, and listened with his head thrown back. Yes, yes, rather funny sight. Meon tried not to laugh, and asked Eddi if he were satisfied. It takes some time to get an idea out of my good Eddi's head. He looked at me. 'Do you want to sprinkle him with holy water and see if he flies up the chimney?' 'Why not baptize him?' said Meon. Eddi was really shocked. I thought it was bad taste myself. 'That's not fair,' said Meon. 'You call him a demon and a familiar spirit because he loves his master and likes music, and when I offer you a chance to prove it, you won't take it. Look here, I'll make a bargain. I'll be baptized if you'll baptize Pata too. He's more of a man than most of my slaves.' 'One doesn't bargain or joke about these matters,' I said. He was going altogether too far. 'Quite right,' said Meon. 'I shouldn't like anyone to joke about Pata, Pa to go down to the beach and bring us